Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55.
Hi, everybody. Today's guest is just so fun and is just so in line with the podcast because, as you all know, I bring in these amazing women over 50 and I always make them go backwards because they all have a story and a journey. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Carrie West is my guest, and she helps you write your story or rewrite your story, which we're going to talk about because sometimes we want to change the narrative in our 50s. She is also the author of the book. I love this title, Memoir of an Ordinary Person and the Stories That Changed Her Life. So Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I love that introduction. I love what you said about where we are in our lives. It's perfect.
Yeah. And I'm interviewing women over 50 and we have incredible stories. So before we talk about how you help us tell our stories, recreate our stories, I want to hear your story because we talked and I made you stop when I met you because I'm like, no. Save all this for the podcast because this is so good. So let's go back to college and kind of talk about how you got here today.
You know, it's funny. I said to a friend of mine one day, I'm really a late bloomer boomer because I am definitely the boomer generation. And there was a time I thought, well, I got to get ready for retirement. I have to get ready for when I get into my 60s. And then it occurred to me that I didn't know why I needed to get ready for that. So I had a very humble beginning from a very poor family. Let's just put it that way. So there were a lot of challenges growing up. And every step of the way, I took charge of my life. And then all of a sudden, you know, after these great things I did for myself, I thought, why am I starting to look at retiring? What? I have so much more to give and I have so much more I want to do. So I said, well, let's keep going. I had gone to film school. I had my master's in film production and writing. And the one thing that occurred to me in film school was story development. And we have a theme in the story. We have characters. We have motivations. We have plots. We have a journey that the protagonist goes on to achieve a result. And I thought, my life was like that. My life was this hero's journey. And we've all seen the hero's journey. It's archetypal, but it's very true and relatable that when you look at what is the theme of your life, what are you trying to do for yourself? Are you trying to prove that love conquers all? Are you trying to prove that life is hard and then you die? I mean, what is the theme? And we all have those. And we have themes in many different aspects of our life. So I took it apart and I said, I'm going to change my theme and I'm going to move on to my sequel.
What was your theme? I want to go back, like when you started, because for you to want to change it, you had to have had something, we had to get to a point. And I know you're kind of brushing over the film school and then this, and you had some fun stories that you told me that I said, don't tell me, save it for the podcast.
Okay. Well, my initial theme from a little kid was survival. I thought if I could just get out of this situation, I'd be okay. The problem with that theme, though, was it drove me. It made me driven to succeed. It didn't drive me to finding happiness. It just drove me to be successful. And I realized that you can be happy and successful. But that didn't give me the career. The career I was doing at that time was what could I do to make the most money? Because that to me was what survival was about, was having
sure,
money.
At that time in your life, that's all you knew. If I make money, I can get out of this.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So when I realized I could be happy, I realized I wanted to go to film school. That was the driving force to film school, not realizing that that was just going to open up my eyes beyond the entertainment industry. This was going to take me to understanding my life on such a profound level. And when I realized that I wasn't even the star of most of my movies, most of my own stories. When I did my college story, it wasn't about what I wanted to do. It was how could I prove myself to my parents? So they were the star of that story. But the interesting thing that I learned, and this is what's really important, is we don't look at our origin story. You know how when you go to a movie, they give you a backstory of the hero so you know why you want to follow them? So I started looking at what was my backstory. And I came to realize that the day we are born, it is like we are an actor waiting in the wings, naked as all get out. And all of a sudden, we land on a stage, and there's this story unfolding around us. Our parents have a story, our siblings have a story, and I was the proverbial middle child. I had all the issues of I didn't have a title, I was the middle child. So I had this huge origin story of not believing in myself, or life was this or life was that. It led me to pick up a theme of survival, but more importantly, in a lot of the subplots and stories in my life, I wasn't even the main character. I was living for other people. And breaking that pattern was huge, just huge. And coming up with a new theme of I'm in charge of my life and I'm going to make the most of it. That in and of itself got me over that hump.
How old were you at that point?
I was in my early 20s when I realized that I needed to create my own life. But it just kept snowballing from there, because every step of the way I realized there was still parts of that original story still holding me back. And it was almost like
but I think about that when you talk about stories, like my parents divorced when I was 6. I didn't choose that story for me, but that was the story of my life. And then what they did with their lives is part of my life, whether I like it or not. But I love this. So you had this, and then you get to your 20s. Yeah. What's the next story?
Well, the next story was finding my passion. And that's where I went to film school. But there was still stuff niggling in with me. And I realized that I was still holding on to some of those original stories. And this is where I had to do something that made me so angry. And that was that I had to forgive my parents. I had to forgive them for being human beings before they were my parents. And they were not set out to be parents. They had their own issues. They had their own challenges. They were immigrants. Both my parents were first-generation Americans. They had a lot of their own stories that they never resolved. And I realized then that we have generational stories, that my mother's stories, she got from her mother, who got them from her mother. And I even think it goes back 7 generations. So,
well, and you have to think, for me, same kind of thing. My parents were children during the war, and my grandparents, lived during the war. My grandmother was Jewish in Berlin because my grandfather was German, during World War II. So her stories are to even think, to process that, but it's handed down. It's the way she raised her kids, and then the way they raised us because of survival mode or whatever she had to do.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
I have a question for you. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
My significant other is British, and his mother grew up in the bombing in England, and she had a And I think this is true for a lot of people whose parents were in the war. Were you taught to be very cautious and reusing a lot of things? I notice Simon's mother reuses everything, and she keeps things well beyond the sell-by date. Do you have? Were your parents?
Yes, and actually I never thought of it that way, because there's a big joke in my family that I'm trying to kill the family because I'll serve them a salad dressing that's been in the pantry for 10 years. But
Yeah.
I can't throw it away, because you're right. I was raised that way. And my mom even said, we didn't have any food, in the 40s. We had to, scrounge. So we were hungry all the time. And that's exactly how I was raised. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is how stories get passed down to us.
Yeah.
We don't know why we do a lot of things. And most of it's innocuous. Most of it is completely innocent, and it doesn't matter anything. Like my mother used to love to cook with Crisco cooking oil. So when it was time for me to bake, I always looked for Crisco because that's what I knew. So
that's what you know. Yeah.
Those don't do you any harm. The ones that do you harm is when your mom says, "Don't date anyone except. Don't go out with this. You must do that. Why are you going?" My mother's big one was, "Why are you going to college? You just need a husband." My mother's big story with me was, "Just get married, have kids. That's what you're here to do anyway." So I think for a lot of women in my generation, we are taught that the most important thing is to get married and have a family. And even when my mom was dying, because she died when I was in my early 30s, she said, "Please just get married. Please. I just want to know you're okay." So that message of why you must get married was something that I didn't want to fight it, but I did. I was that's how my survival kept me going, was I took umbrage with a lot of these things. But but that was her story. And I think if my mom would have been in our generation, she never would have married and had kids. She loved having a career. She wanted to be a career woman. But that just, from immigrant parents, never would have happened. They would not accept that at all.
Okay, so we get through forgiveness in our 20s, and then we're writing another chapter, another story, another theme.
Yes. Once we got through the forgiveness, and I really got into my passions, and I went to film school, and I worked in the entertainment industry, and I had a ball. I really enjoyed it. But
Tell us a fun story. Hold on, we got to do a little sidebar. I always love when I get people from the entertainment industry. We've heard some great stories about Cher and like President Joe Biden. Somebody had a story about him. So give us a really fun story.
Okay, I'm gonna give you this one, and I'm not a name dropper, but there was a famous actor on the
drop.
Oh, okay, Harrison Ford.
Okay, fabulous.
Harrison Ford was filming a movie on the lot, and his trailer was right outside my window in the production company I was working for. And I'd come in the morning, and he'd be sitting in the trailer, and he'd look at me through the window. And I'd wave hi, and then he'd put up a sign, "You want some coffee?" And I'd say, "No, I'm working here." And he'd be, people think that the entertainment industry is all kinds of things, but it's a lot of start and stop. So the actor goes on the stage for a bit of time, but the rest of the time they're sitting in their trailer or they're hanging out. So he was bored, and he would, "Come on by, get a coffee." And he'd hang up signs, and I'd close the window. I'd close the shade because he was just it was adorable. He was very funny and just a genuinely sweet person. But then I'd come in the morning, and he'd be like looking around the corner of his trailer to see when I would come in and wave at me, and I'd wave, "Please don't close the blinds. Come on over and talk. We'll have coffee." And it was just so much. It was very adorable.
Wow.
But,
did you ever go in for coffee?
I didn't. No, because I had a couple other people here who were very annoyed that he was being such a brat like that. So it was so much fun, and I watch some of these people now on red carpets, and I think if they only knew that this is their job. this is the work they do to promote their films and to promote themselves. And in real life, they're so much more fun and genuine and relaxed. They don't seem as stiff to me as they do in real life. I don't think they're as stiff as they seem to me on a red carpet. But this was a few years ago, so he was much younger then, and so was I. But it was so much fun. It was a lot of fun.
Well, and that was part of his story. So now we'll continue on with your story. So we know you had fun during your film time.
Yes. But there was something more. And that more was to be a writer. And that one tripped me up for a long time. That tripped me up because I still had the thought in the back of my head that that's not a real job. That's not a real job. How can you make money if you're a writer? How can you do that? So I actually started as a writer for a number of websites, and I became a contributing editor and a managing editor for a couple websites where we did a lot of writing. But I still had it in me that I wanted to get that book out. I still had that drive in me. So I had to re-examine it and say, what is the book? Because I've written smaller books and I've done a couple other things, but what is the book that I want to tell that would really connect with people and inspire them? And I thought about how at this point I'd already been working with clients about changing their stories and helping them uncover their themes and their motivations and, what motivates you to get up in the morning. That's huge. That's huge. And that comes from when you're on a movie set, an actor might be looking at a line and they'll say to the director, what's my motivation here? What am I trying to get across? This doesn't feel like I'm going to be able to do that. So this is when you see actors and directors work on the fly, changing some of the script. It happens quite often. So I worked with a lot of people to help them get that. But I thought, where is my next step? Am I going to get this book out? And here I was, even older than I was when I went to film school and getting these things done. And that's why I call myself a late bloomer boomer. And I said, done, I'm writing the book. So I did. And that's been an interesting journey. Writing the book really uncovered. It's fascinating to me how every step of the way I have learned even more about the stories we tell ourselves and how they impact us and how with just a few simple twists, you get that aha moment. Have you ever had that aha moment where you just go, oh, wow.
This podcast was an aha moment. This podcast was and you talk about stories. I didn't know what I wanted to do till I was in my 50s. I mean, in my 50s, I started being on TV regularly. I started a podcast. The whole PR side of the business has taken off. Like I've done so many things, but, and people have asked me to do podcasts for years. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But then when it was bringing on women like you to tell these amazing stories, that was the aha moment. I knew that I could help people share their stories with people who would want to hear them. And that was my and this is one of the greatest things I've ever done. I love it.
Now, see, that's it. That's that moment of absolute perfection, I think. And when you reach that, it does change everything, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. One of the things I love that when I was, looking into you before the interview was there's some perceived stories, women over 55. Oh, you're going to hit menopause and this is going to happen and you're not going to want to do this and you're not going to, it's pre-described for us. And it's like, but no, it doesn't have to be like this. Like we can break that. We don't have to live that. I mean, you said you're in your 60s and look at you, it's amazing. But so I like when you talk about we can rewrite our own stories. So talk a little bit more about that at any point in our lives. It doesn't have to be over 50, but we have the power to do that.
No, when you make a decision to change, what you're really doing is updating your story. And to me, I call it's the next chapter. You're writing your sequel. You were back for the next James Bond movie. James Bond has been reinvented and rewritten with new actors and new characters every year. So we can do that too. But the other aha moment for me that really pushed me and it's so funny how life happens. I was having a lot of doubts after writing this book and thinking about, this has been a challenge. And it was time for me to look at Medicare. You haven't reached that point yet, but insurance companies have a way. If you look at the commercials on TV and you look at the Medicare flyers, everybody sends them out. They're pictures of people hunched over, men and women, with the oxygen tanks and the canes and
Sure.
the.
You are not the first person to use this exact analogy of this is not us, right?
Yes, and that's when I said, no more, no,
right.
I ain't buying it. I'm not buying what you're selling. And just that statement of, I'm not buying what you're selling, think of what we have been sold. And when I worked in the entertainment industry, it's rampant where they say when a woman hits even her 30s and 40s, it's, got to go younger, got to go younger. Men in their 60s and 70s are the main actors, and they bring on an actress in her 20s to be the significant other. Ageism is so rampant there. But for me, in my life, I had decided, and by the way, I was in my 30s and I was writing for MTV. So that just proves you don't have to be a certain age group to do things. But when I looked at this Medicare brochure, I started paying attention to what other stories we have been told as women in a group. Now, again, my generation was told, get married, have babies. That's fine. But what about the next generation coming up? What were they directed to do? What was their role in life? And I thought, I don't know all of that, but I do know that we don't have to buy what they are selling. We don't have to accept the way they depict us on TV shows, in movies. I love that now they're doing a lot of kick-ass women as superhero roles. I love that. I want to see more of that. And in fact, I want it to be gender neutral. Why do they have to cast a woman in that role just to prove a point? Why don't you cast the woman because she's right for that role? And now there's all the backlash about Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig not being nominated for Oscars from the top movie. I have no idea why they didn't get it, except there's still this perceived notion about women in Hollywood.
And Greta, she is I believe it's the highest grossing director. I know as a woman, yes. But there's some other, it's like, how do you not acknowledge that? That's a big problem in Hollywood still. Yeah. And I had a guest on, we talked about ageism, and she said the most profound thing about ageism in corporate. A woman gets into a job, she's in her 20s, she's too sexy, she's too pretty. Then she gets pregnant, she's a liability. Then, God forbid, you get divorced, because then you're, maybe out to get all the men in the office. And then you hit 50 and you have no kids, nothing tying you down. You could travel everywhere for work. You could be the best employee and they kick you out. You could be mentoring these younger women and they're like, oh, no, she's too old now. So it's like, especially for women, there's never a right time or a place to be in the working world.
You've got me on that one. There's two things.
I know. But when she said that, I was like, oh, you're right.
Simon and I, we had a joint client that he's an IT guru. So he was talking to them about IT. He wanted me to talk to them about some of the business practices they were doing, because I love talking to a group. So I would give these conversations in front of the group of their employees that have these speaking engagements. After each engagement I did, I would get notes from the women in the audience thanking me for showing them that women can do more than what they're seeing in the workplace. That broke my heart. And that, again, was another motivation for this journey I'm on now. But the thing that really got me is before I did my talk, Simon and I were meeting with the executives who were putting this together. And they're talking and they're going over and over. And by the way, I was the only woman in the room. I was the only woman at the table, which, how many women have you heard that from? More than a dozen. And they asked a question, and while there was a pause in the air, I answered it and said, well, why don't you do this, this, and this? And they kind of went, oh, but kept talking, so no real response. And on a break, I said to Simon, do me a favor. You know that recommendation I made? He said, yeah. I said, I want you to bring it up when we get back in the session. He said, all right. He brought it up. What a great idea, Simon. Good idea. Let's do it. Let's move forward.
Do you know the story about Uncle Nearest bourbon? It's a fantastic story. It's a woman's family, and her great uncle, I guess, actually taught Jim Beam how to make bourbon. And anyway,
Okay.
she uncovers the whole story and she wants to recreate it. So she's now the only woman in the bourbon industry, and she's a Black woman, unheard of. So same thing. She's picking up the phone, calling to partner with people and work with people. No callbacks, no anything. She gave her husband the same list and said, I want you to call. Got every call, every meeting. It's like, and this was all her. This is her company, her idea, her concept, her everything.
Yeah. The sad part is, we're not alone in this. This is more common than it isn't.
I know. Hopefully, I have a 24-year-old daughter, and I hope for her things are changing. But I want to get back to what you do, because I think what you're doing is so impactful, and I want to do it. Like, my kids see me, but I want to share like my legacy, my story. So talk about how you work with people and help them, write their story, rewrite their story, really, put their true passion and their true lives down on paper.
Yeah. Well, the very first thing I do, and this will be my first module for I'm building an online course to go with my book, but it's about finding your origin story. That is so foundational to who we are. And when you understand your origin story, you start to understand who you are now. It is a continuation. And there's so many things we do now that we've been doing since day one. And even in businesses have origin stories. And depending on the founders and what their story was. So getting to the root of who you are at such a basic level is so valuable to understanding who you are today, why you are who you are today. So we start there, and then we look at your relationship with your family and your siblings and all that stuff. But what's really important is I've had more clients have aha moments right when we're going through the origin story that's changed them immediately.
Right. If you understand your why you are, how you are, who you are, because of that.
Yes. Because a lot of people come to me to work with relationships, my relationship with my spouse, with my daughter, with my son. And you realize that you're carrying on the tradition that your parents handed you. My parents never gave me a curfew, never put any kind of guidance or boundaries like that on me. I ran rampant pretty much. I figured out stuff on my own. So I have a stepson with Simon's son, and I see how Simon just, do this, do that. And I said, let him figure it out. He can figure it out. And he said, how did you figure things out? And I went, oh my God. To get that aha moment, to understand why we do what we do, changed me. So that's the starting point, is what's your origin story? From there, we get to know your theme. We get to know who are the characters in your story. Are you the protagonist? If so, who's the antagonist? Who is the one that causes you the most aggravation? And then what's your motivation? What motivates you to get up in the morning? What motivated you to look for a job as an executive at a company versus a writer? What motivated you to become a lawyer rather than a scientist? What motivated you to become a wife and mother rather than a career woman? No judgment. We just want to know what the motivation was. No, I have no qualms. You get to be whoever you want to be. So that's the motivation.
And then that helps you write that next chapter, right? If you could figure that out, and then it's like, ooh, but I want to change that. Like, I think I want to go this way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Theme is critical. If your theme is love hurts, then you're not going to look for relationships that are healthy and happy. If you can change the love hurts to love is exciting, love is fulfilling, love is everything, love can be everything, then you start looking for relationships that support that theme. And you can change your story. You ended that story. In every sequel, we learn something new about the characters.
Yeah.
Yes. Close that book, get a new book.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And easy. It's amazing to me how easy it is. People can spend years in therapy, but let's just understand why you are who you are today. And then we can change it. If you decide you want to be financially successful, then look, what's the theme that's holding you back? Well, I have a theme of you have to earn every dollar. It has to be hard work. And you have to have a career that pays well. What if you have a theme that I love what I do and I am taken care of financially as a result. I am rewarded financially as a result. We all know a dog walker friend of mine started doing videos on walking dogs and what she learned about dogs, and has more sponsors and followers.
And then, so all the information's on your website. What is your website if people wanted to learn more?
Yes, CarrieKCWest.com. CarrieKC West.com. And,
awesome. And then
very excited.
You've got the book coming out and the course coming out. And because I just think it's fun to, if somebody really wanted to go deeper, like you can think about your origin story, but if, call Carrie if you want to change your chapters and go to the sequel. So one of the things we do at the end of every episode, I ask my guests the same questions. So what is your greatest accomplishment since you've turned 50?
Only one?
You can give me 10.
Hyman and I were 55 when we got together. I had never been in a relationship for more than 2 or 3 months. And at 55 years old, my friend Simon became my partner. And we hadn't even gone on a date. We were having coffee and we all of a sudden looked at each other and said, I don't think we're friends anymore. We're more than friends. That was magical.
Wait, but let's tie it all together here, because you had your mother telling you, just get married and have babies, just get married and have babies. And you probably went the opposite if you only dated for a couple months at a time, because you weren't going to do that, but you found your soulmate, or what appears to be your soulmate. Yes. And that was not part of your origin story to do it that way. So you wrote a whole new chapter. I love that.
Yep.
That's great.
Yes. And we're still not married. We've talked about it a few times, but that's we own a house together. We have other things we own together, so it's okay.
No, I was just going to say, look at Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. And they're, royalty, and they never wanted to get married. Okay, the second greatest thing
was building this life with the book and with the work I'm doing. That was the story I wanted to write all those years ago when I took those jobs writing for websites and being a managing editor. Writing this book was what I wanted to put out in the world. And
congratulations.
It'll be out this year. So And then I got to figure out what I'm going to do for the next decade, because I'm sure I have more dreams after that. That's the beauty. That's the beauty.
And that's actually the last question. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Yes, that's the beauty. You finish one book, there's millions more to be written. We all have within us more stories to tell, more stories to write. I want to see what you do next.
I've got big plans, so we'll see. Carrie, thank you so much. That was really great. I know we're going to inspire a lot of people listening to really think about their lives and their stories and the legacy they want to leave behind. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.
Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.